never thought a small lie would spiral into something uncontrollable, but here I am. It all started when I moved to a new city, desperate to make friends. At a casual hangout, someone mentioned rock climbing, and without thinking, I blurted out, "Oh yeah, I climb all the time." I had never touched a climbing wall in my life, but the excitement in their eyes made it impossible to take it back. Suddenly, I wasn't just some new guy. I was interesting. The problem? They invited me to go climbing the next weekend. I should have confessed right then, but my pride wouldn't let me. Instead, I spent the whole week watching YouTube tutorials, memorizing climbing jargon, and hoping I wouldn't embarrass myself. My stomach twisted at the thought of them finding out, but I told myself, it's just one time. Just get through it. The climbing gym was more intimidating than I expected. The walls towered above me, covered in bright handholds that seemed impossible to grasp. My friends were excited, encouraging me to show off my skills. My hands were sweaty as I clipped into the harness, pretending to examine the wall like a pro. I made my way up, gripping the wrong holds, struggling to find my footing. My arms ached almost immediately, but I forced myself to keep going. They cheered, completely unaware that I was barely hanging on. When I finally reached the top, my body was shaking, but I faked a confident grin. "Just warming up," I joked. Inside, I knew I was in way over my head. After that first climb, I assumed they'd forget about it, but I was wrong. They were thrilled to have a skilled climber in the group and started planning more challenging trips. I tried making excuses, but every time, my fear of being exposed overpowered my common sense. I told myself I could learn fast enough to keep up. But every climb was a nightmare. My muscles ached, my fingers burned, and I was constantly terrified of making a mistake. Worse, they kept asking for tips, expecting me to guide them. I used vague phrases, copying things I'd heard online, hoping they wouldn't catch on. Every outing felt like an exam I was destined to fail. Everything fell apart when they planned an outdoor climbing trip. Unlike the controlled environment of the gym, this was real. Rock, wind, and no safety mats. As we reached the climbing site, my stomach twisted in knots. They expected me to lead the route, to set an example. I stood at the base of the rock face, staring at the jagged surface. My friends waited, their trust in me evident. I couldn't do it. I couldn't fake this. My hands shook as I turned to them, finally admitting, I've never actually climbed before. The weight of my lie crushed me as their faces shifted from excitement to confusion. The silence was unbearable. "Wait, what?" one of them finally asked. "Are you serious?" I nodded, my face burning with embarrassment. The trust they had in me shattered in an instant. Some of them laughed in disbelief, others looked disappointed. "Why would you lie about that?" someone asked. I had no good answer. I expected them to be furious, to cut me off completely, but instead, one of them sighed and said, "Man, you should have just told us." They weren't angry, they were hurt. I had built my friendships on a foundation of lies, and now that foundation was crumbling. After the initial shock wore off, the group's reactions started to sink in. No one yelled or stormed off, but the disappointment in their eyes stung worse than anything they could have said. I had spent months convincing myself that lying was the only way to belong. But now, standing there in my harness, I realized I had only made things worse. One of them, Jake, finally broke the silence. "You should have just been honest, man. We wouldn't have cared." The others nodded, some still processing, but no one seemed as furious as I had feared. I had expected them to turn on me, but instead they were just sad. I had lied to them, and worse, I had lied to myself. That night, I lay in my tent, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. I had spent so much time pretending, so much energy keeping up this facade, that I had forgotten to actually enjoy being with these people. I thought about why I had done it, why I felt the need to be someone I wasn't. It wasn't about climbing, it was about being liked. I had been so desperate to fit in that I had convinced myself I needed a skill to be accepted. But now I saw the truth. These people didn't care about my skills. They just wanted a friend they could trust. And I had failed them. The next morning I woke up early and found the group gathered around the fire, eating breakfast. My stomach was in knots, but I knew I couldn't avoid this conversation. I sat down and took a deep breath. "I'm really sorry," I started. "I should have told the truth from the beginning. I wanted to fit in so badly." For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of them, Sarah, shrugged. "Look, it was dumb, yeah, but it's not like we're perfect either." Another friend, Mark, added, "You don't have to fake anything to be our friend. Just be you, man." The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. They weren't excusing what I did, but they were giving me a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. Later that day, the group decided to go climbing again. This time, when they asked if I wanted to join, I didn't fake confidence. I told them the truth. I had no idea what I was doing, but I was willing to learn if they were willing to teach me. To my surprise, they were more excited about that than anything else. Jake helped me with the basics, teaching me how to position my feet and use my legs instead of just my arms. Sarah talked me through the route, giving me tips along the way. For the first time, I climbed without pretending. I didn't reach the top, but I made progress. And for the first time in months, I felt like I belonged. Not because of a lie, but because of honesty. That night, as we packed up to leave, I realized how much lighter I felt. The burden of my lie was gone, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a fraud. I wasn't the best climber. I wasn't the most impressive guy in the group, but I was their friend, and that was enough. As we loaded up the cars, Sarah grinned at me. "So next time, no lying, right?" she teased. I laughed and nodded. "No lying," I promised. It had taken me too long to learn, but I finally understood. Belonging doesn't come from pretending. It comes from being yourself. Looking back, I don't regret wanting to be accepted. I think that's human. But I do regret believing I had to be someone else to make it happen. If I had just been honest from the start, I wouldn't have wasted so much time living a lie. Fitting in doesn't mean being perfect. It means being real. And that's a lesson I won't forget.